When I was being roped, my brother tried to save me and unfortunately became a vegetable. My father blamed me for causing him to lose his proud son. My mother asked me why I didn't die, and she said I was the one who should be lying in a hospital bed. Later I really died, but my brother miraculously woke up. 1. My brother looked at the unfamiliar environment with a bewildered look on his face, then turned to the doctor and said, "Hello, have you notified my parents for me?" The doctor smiled and nodded repeatedly. I think the doctors are happy for him too. Seeing the doctor nod, my younger brother added, "Oh, and my sister, Rebecca, don't forget to notify her." As soon as he finished speaking, our mother came hurriedly in her high heels. She is still so radiant and capable. Following behind her was our father in a suit. Mom covered her mouth and looked at my brother in disbelief. "Alex, you wake up, I'm not dreaming." My brother shook his head and opened his arms to his parents. "You are not dreaming, Mom and Dad, I'm fine. I really am fine." The family of 3 hugged each other and cried with joy. It was such a touching scene that even the young nurse next to them had tears in her eyes. After a while, my brother looked at the door and asked in confusion, "Mom, where's my sister? Isn't she here with you?" Mom was stunned. "I'll call her now." She passed through my body with the phone and walked out of the ward. After looking through the address book for a long time, she finally realized that my number was not saved at all. Her finger tried the dialing interface several times, but she still couldn't remember my number. She simply chose to send WeChat. Our WeChat conversation still stops at the last message she sent me 2 months ago. "I don't have a daughter like you. You are the one who should be lying on the hospital bed. Why don't you just die?" My mother's face was gloomy for a few seconds, and she quickly typed a few lines on the keyboard. "Alex wakes up and demands to see you. He just woke up and can't stand the stimulation. Don't say anything you shouldn't say." "But mother, I'm already dead. What else can I say? What should I say?" 2. For several days, I didn't reply to the message. Faced with my brother's questions, my mother began to become impatient. However, she could only take out her anger on me like she did when I was a child. "What a cold-hearted thing. Your brother woke up, and you didn't even look at him. Nor did you reply to his message. If he hadn't saved you, you would have died long ago." I have heard these words countless times over the past 5 years. My mother was right. It was my younger brother who saved me in the first place. That night after get off work, I was passing by an alley, and a hand covered my mouth. In the dark and damp alley, I couldn't even see the man's face clearly. I was dragged into a corner. No matter how much I cry and beg for mercy, the men were indifferent. He slapped me across the face one after another, until I couldn't make a sound. The person who saved me was my brother. He had to pass through this alley to come to see me, and he was fighting with the man like a madman. But how can college students who haven't graduated yet compete with adult men? My brother was stabbed several times, and his clothes were soaked with scarlet blood. He pointed to the cake mixed with the mud. "Sis, happy birthday." Then he fell straight in front of me. Dad patted Mom's shoulder from behind and said, "Don't be angry. You know Rebecca is not close to us. Today is a good day for Alex to be discharged from the hospital. Don't let it spoil your fun." 3. I sat in my dad's car and went home with them. My younger brother kept chattering along the way, saying that the city was developing very fast. Then he said that he must catch up on all the One Piece that he hadn't finished watching before. He is always so optimistic and sunny, as if lying in bed for 5 years has no effect on him at all. I am 3 years older than my brother, ever since he was born. Whenever there is something delicious, the first person my mother thinks of is him. And I can only eat the leftovers. It's like my brother gets the drumsticks, while I'm left with the bony feet and wings that my younger brother wanted a new school bag, and my mother bought it for him without saying a word. "I want a workbook," Mom would say. "You don't have that kind of brain, so it's useless to buy it. Look at your brother. He got first place in the exam again." Yes, my younger brother inherited good genes from my parents. As for me, my classmates said behind my back, "I don't think Rebecca is their biological daughter. Her mother is a famous lawyer, and her father is a university professor. Look at her. She is so stupid and always ranks last in every exam." At that time, I hated my brother very much. I naively thought that he had taken away my parents' love. He seemed to realize it too. I caught him red-handed when he was secretly stuffing snacks and toys into my school bag for the nith time. He scratched his head and asked me cautiously, "Sis, don't you like me?" I glared at him unhappily. "Yes, I don't like you. Don't put messy things in my school bag in the future." There was a flash of loneliness in his eyes, and then he smiled at me. "It's okay. I just like you." Many times I feel that what my mother says makes sense. Such an outstanding boy like my younger brother shouldn't have become a vegetable because of me. But fortunately, he woke up. 4. My parents specially invited relatives and friends to hold a banquet for my younger brother at home, celebrate his rebirth. Grandma, leaning on a cane, hugs her eldest grandson. "Thank God, Alex, you finally woke up." Her cloudy eyes were filled with tears. The uncles and aunts all held my brother's hands and asked him all kinds of questions. Some said it was a medical miracle, while others said it was the brother's kindness. When people were immersed in the joy of his brother waking up, his sudden words made everyone present look a little colder. Mom and Dad, don't forget to call my sister and tell her that I'm home. Ask her to come home directly after a business trip. Seeing that I didn't reply to their messages, my parents could only use the excuse that I was on a business trip to fool my brother. They never thought about whether something happened to me. They will just think that I am a heartless and ungrateful person. I didn't understand why I had a younger brother before. Everybody dislikes me anymore. As I grew older, I gradually understood. Not all parents are born to love their children, just like lions will abandon their inferior cubs. Except for me, everyone in my family graduated from a prestigious university, and the worst one graduated from a first-class university. Only I, after trying my best, was able to get into an ordinary university. It became a stain on the family. 5. My brother looked at the table full of food and frowned slightly. Why did you put so much cilantro? Dad smiled and picked up a mantis shrimp and placed it in front of my brother. I remember you liked eating cilantro the most. How come you've changed your habits after lying down for 5 years? My brother thanked his father, being polite as always. Have you forgotten that my sister is allergic to cilantro? Next time, don't let the nanny put cilantro in her cooking. I stood next to my father and watched the expression on his face. It's not that he forgot, it's that he never remembered. When I was a child, because my younger brother loved eating coriander, I would be picky about it every time we ate. But in the eyes of my parents, I become a picky eater. They would scold me and punish me by not letting me eat. When I cried and defended myself, they just blamed me for not speaking up sooner. But the next time we ate, there was still coriander in every dish. In this family, there is no one except my younger brother whom I once hated. No one remembers my preferences. No one cares about my life or death. 6. After dinner, my brother went straight upstairs and into my room. A tidy bed and a dusty desk. All of this reveals the distance between me and this home. After graduating from college, my mother gave me 2 choices. Either you choose to continue to study for the postgraduate entrance examination, or get out of this house. I don't have a daughter as unmotivated as you. I think not everyone in this world is perfect. There are many ordinary people, and I don't have any big ambitions. I don't want to continue to cater to her, because I could never be the perfect daughter she envisioned. So I chose to move out and went to work in an ordinary company. My brother sat at my desk, mumbling something. Sis, the day after tomorrow is your birthday. After you come back, don't move out again. You promised me. My eyes were so dry that I reached out and touched the corners of my eyes. No tears. The soul doesn't shed tears. After I moved out, my brother asked me for my address in different ways every day. I couldn't stand his nagging. On my birthday, he said he had bought a cake to celebrate my birthday. Also on this day, I am no longer myself. I have been pulled into an endless abyss. My parents' resentment tormented me and kept me awake all night long. The doctor told me, "You are still young. You can't live in the shadow all your life. Try to get out of it. Your brother certainly wouldn't want you to give up on yourself like this." I touched the crisscrossing scars on my arms and smiled bitterly. It's not like I haven't tried, but my parents wouldn't let me go out. They reminded me of my sin over and over again. I should live in self-blame and guilt forever. 7. I followed my brother into my mother's study. This was my first time entering her study. She is a famous lawyer, and she has never lost a case she has taken on. When Mom saw my brother coming in, a smile appeared on her face. "Why haven't you slept yet? Are you not used to it?" My brother shook his head. "Mom, is my sister still working at the same company as before? I want to go see her tomorrow. Remember to buy me a cell phone." My mother's expression froze, and she was silent for a while. She said, "You have just recovered. I've already asked about it. She will be back in a few days." I stood by and laughed to myself. Over the years, my parents even didn't know the name of my company or where I lived. I don't know. Who else can I ask? My brother nodded and turned to leave the study. Mom continued to look through the information in her hand. One photo after another appeared before her eyes. The photo shows a body thrown into a garbage dump. My mother frowned tightly, as if she also felt the cruelty of the murderer. Even so, she still took the case. I couldn't help but wonder if she knew. Her client was the murderer of her own daughter. How would you feel? 8. Dad walked into the study with milk. He glanced at the photo on the table and immediately turned his face away. "Nancy, do you really want to take this case? Didn't you say the identity of the deceased has not been confirmed? How could someone plead guilty?" Mom took the milk and took a sip. Who knows the logic of a murderer? This little girl is so pitiful. I don't know how her parents are as parents. She has been missing for so long, and no one has found her. Hearing this, a trace of tears welled up in Dad's eyes. He seemed to be feeling sad for the victim. He looked at his mother and said, "This case is already a done deal. The murderer has turned himself in. There is nothing you can do to change it." Mom smiled confidently and said nothing more. It seemed like everything was under her control. When I was a child, my mother often appeared on TV, and she often said that she became a lawyer in order to seek justice. But in the face of popularity, fame, and money, she seemed to have changed. She became selfish and vain. Do whatever it takes to win a lawsuit. She can't accept negative comments from others. including her children. She couldn't accept it at all. That's why she hates me so much, because I'm mediocre. Nah. I leaned my head on my mother's shoulder and asked her in a calm tone, Mom, they say that mother and child are connected by heart. Can't you feel how much pain I was in? A month ago, I went to the hospital to visit my brother. I bumped into my mother, who had just left the ward. I subconsciously pulled my sleeves and took a few steps back. She glanced at me with a look of extreme indifference. What are you doing here? You still have the nerve to come and see him. After my brother got into trouble, my parents didn't allow me to visit him. Every time I come, I choose the evening on purpose. But I didn't expect to meet her again. I didn't answer her and put the flowers on the bedside table. The next second, the flowers fell to the ground. My mother pointed at my face and said, Take your tattered flowers and get out. If I catch you again, I will transfer your brother to another hospital. If you don't want him to be bumpy, don't come to see him again. The tears that I had been holding back fell down unwillingly. I yelled at her. Why are you doing this to me? Why? If I could, I would rather be the one lying there. This way I won't be tortured and unable to sleep every night. She didn't answer me, but simply chose to ignore me. I left the hospital in a daze and hailed a taxi. I didn't know it at the time, but this taxi was waiting for me specifically. I was drowning in misery. I hate myself for being so weak and incompetent. Knowing that she pushed me away again and again, it's a sign of not loving me. I still long to see something strange in her eyes, even if it's disguised. 10. Growing up, I couldn't have my own hobbies. You can't have any friends. What she said will only affect my studies. To get her approval, I did it. I peeled off the layers of who I was. Then little by little I try to force in something that doesn't belong to me. I stubbornly believe that only in this way would my mother love me. I clenched my hands tightly, letting my nails dig into my flesh. It seems that only in this way can I suppress my trembling body. But he didn't notice that he had been taken to the wilderness. Suddenly the driver asked out of the blue, Are you Nancy S. daughter? I suddenly came to my senses and nodded woodenly. Then he immediately shook his head. The man grabbed my arm and dragged me out of the car. Dark night. A strange man. Wet ground. The highly overlapping scenes made my legs tremble uncontrollably. The huge fear gripped my throat and made me forget to beg for mercy. I can only retreat step by step. The man said, If you want to blame someone, blame your mom. It's your mother who is indiscriminate. What a bullshit lawyer who upholds justice. They're all lies. The pain came from my thighs to my arms. The heart-wrenching pain made me instinctively shout out those two words. Mom, it hurt so much. Mom, save me. I used all my strength to reach for the phone in my pocket. The man unexpectedly stopped, and under his gaze I called her. The number you dialed is currently in use. The man said in a disappointed tone. Why didn't the call go through? He took my phone away. But at this moment, I didn't feel any pain at all. Disappointment seeped from my bones and paralyzed all the nerves in my body. I have told myself this countless times. Never mind. If you don't love it, then don't love it. But every holiday, such as Christmas, these traditional festivals, make me, who is originally lonely, long for family affection even more. I always want to try again. Even if they don't let me go home. Even if I am always met with ridicule, abuse, and resentment in return. But at least their voices could be heard on the phone. And the empty house was no longer eerily quiet. No longer just my breathing. Maybe he didn't want to waste his breath on me anymore. So he killed my last thought. The night was very quiet. So quiet that the only sound I could hear was the sound of my blood flowing. 11. In a trance, I thought of my younger brother. When I was in school, my classmates collectively isolated me, talking bad about me behind my back and calling me nicknames. One time after school, I was cornered by several senior girls. Rebecca, why are you being so boring? Who are you trying to please by having such a sullen face all day long? You just rely on your parents' abilities. But so what? I heard that your parents don't like you at all. My parents almost never came to my parent-teacher meetings. And when they did, they always had a gloomy face and were disgusted that I was bringing shame to them. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that my parents treat me differently. A child without support is destined to be isolated and helpless. Get out of the way. The young man's clear voice sounded. The younger brother stood in the sun, his eyes full of anger. Next time I see you bullying my sister, you will be in trouble. My younger brother is very handsome. Although he is only 13 years old, he is already a head taller than me. After several girls were driven away, he still did not forget to show off in front of me. He shook his bangs and said, Was I handsome just now? I was amused by this action, and my gloomy mood disappeared. Since then, my brother has become my bodyguard. He follows me wherever I go. He said that no matter what happens in the future, he will stand by me, protect me. It was he who helped me slowly find myself again. I am not greedy. I thought that even if my parents didn't love me, it would be nice to have a younger brother. But fate is so unfair. It took away the only person who loved me. My soul left my body the next second after my breathing stopped. I thought death was the source of an end to all suffering. Unfortunately, I was wrong. I was pulled back to my loved ones by an unknown force. I saw my mother wake up from a nightmare, and it was the first time she dreamed of me. See, how can you not feel it? Just like she always said, I am your mother. Your life and your body belong to me. I was conceived in her belly, even after the umbilical cord was cut. But the blood bond has never been broken. So much so that after I died, my soul was pulled back to her. 12. Soon it was my birthday, and my brother became increasingly anxious. An inexplicable uneasiness spread in his heart. He found my company while his parents were not at home, based on his memory from 5 years ago. He asked the company manager where I was on business and how long it would take me to be back. The manager looked confused. What business trip? Rebecca hasn't been to the company for a month. The ugly lie was exposed and the brother stayed where he was. He stumbled all the way to my rental house. I kept mumbling, but my parents said my sister was on a business trip. There must be something wrong. He didn't believe that his beloved parents would lie. I don't believe there are parents who don't love their children. He always said that we are all family and his parents are just great. He firmly believes that there is no overnight grudge among family members. The more innocent my younger brother is, the more scheming I appear. The first time he talked back to my mom about me was the day I moved out of the house. He looked at his mother with disappointment in his eyes. I always thought that your different treatment of my sister was caused by me, so I tried my best to make it up to my sister. Now I know that you would be like this even without me. Everything you do is just to satisfy your vanity. Faced with the accusations, my mother, who had always been strong, cried. She leaned in my father's arms, feeling so aggrieved that she couldn't control herself. Dad scolded my younger brother for not understanding his parents' painstaking efforts. Everything your mom and I did was for your sister's good. What parent doesn't love their child? It's fine if your sister doesn't understand your mom's painstaking efforts, but you have to learn from her. What kind of drug did she give you to make you protect her like this? They stand on the moral high ground and point out all my faults. I left home under my brother's wavering gaze. I knew he hesitated and questioned, but he was not wrong. Since he was born, he has grown up with full love from his parents, so he cannot understand my despair and helplessness. My brother clenched his fists and knocked hard on the door, desperate to prove something. The knock on the door attracted the landlady next door. She looked at the boy in front of the door who looked similar to me, and spoke slowly. Excuse me, who are you? The younger brother turned to look at the person who came. I am Rebecca's younger brother. Grandma, do you know my sister? The landlady replied, Yes, I know her. Your sister rented my house. She hasn't been home for a month. Did she go home? If you go home, you should spend more time with Rebecca. She has lived with me for 5 years, and has always been alone and has few friends. It's not good for a young girl to be like this. It's easy to get suffocated. After the landlord left, my brother squatted in front of my door for a long time. He seemed to be thinking. I neither went home, nor went to the company. So where should I go? Where can I go? The color gradually drained from his face and turned pale. He didn't dare to think further. 13. As soon as my younger brother calmed down and got home, my mother came up to him with a worried look on her face and held his hand. Where have you been? You didn't answer my calls. Are you trying to drive me crazy? The younger brother raised his eyes to meet his mother's and spoke coldly. Do you know what day it is today? Under his mother's puzzled gaze, his brother laughed out loud. He shook off his mother's hand and yelled, Rebecca's not on a business trip. Why did you lie? He approached his mother little by little. Did you know she hasn't been to the company for a month? She's been missing for over a month. Did you know that? How could you be so careless towards her? Aren't you worried that something might happen to her? Faced with his brother's repeated questioning, my mother's expression was calm from beginning to end. She said calmly, What could possibly happen to her? Alex, don't forget. She is the one who made you like this. The younger brother stepped back a little bit and looked at his mother in disbelief. So you've been blaming her for the past 5 years? As they were talking, Dad came back. He sensed the strange atmosphere, and he stepped forward to hold his brother's shaking body. What's wrong? Alex, don't get emotional. My brother's lips trembled, and he grabbed my father's arms. You've hated your sister as much as Mom has for the past 5 years, right? How could he not hate me? He approves of everything my mother does. He even concealed the scandal of my being sexually assaulted for the sake of his reputation. He said, Rebecca, I am doing this for your own good. You will get married in the future. I am a man, and no man would want a woman who has been or zero ped. Is it funny? The person who said this was actually my biological father. For the first time, my younger brother felt the cold-bloodedness of his parents. Seeing his father lowering his head and keeping silent, he suddenly understood something. He fell to the ground. What qualifications do you have to hate her? Have you forgotten that she is also a victim? Just then, my mother's cell phone rang. I moved closer. It's an unfamiliar number. Is it Nancy? The victim has been identified. Yesterday, an old man found a body in a garbage station and DNA was compared. The person on the other end of the phone paused for a few seconds. It is confirmed that the victim is Rebecca. Since you are relatives, you need to recuse yourself from this lawsuit. I would also like to trouble you and your family to come to the police station. 14. I have wondered countless times how my mother would react when she found out the truth. Will she regret what she did? Will you cry and shed tears for me in grief? Like a dog, I tried hard to see a hint of regret in her eyes. But she was always very calm. After hanging up the phone, she acted as if nothing had happened. Called the nanny to prepare dinner. She tried to please my brother by inviting him to eat. The brother smiled and shook her hand off. You are simply unworthy of being a mother. I have wondered countless times if I were like my sister, would you and Dad also stop loving me? But now I have the answer. Maybe my mother didn't stand steadily and fell to the ground. Her eyes were filled with tears, and she looked at her brother absent-mindedly. Then what do you want me to do? She's already dead. Are you going to let me pay for her life? Dad and brother were both shocked by her words. Nancy, who called just now, Mom got up from the ground and calmly adjusted her clothes. The voice was so calm that not a single ripple could be heard. Police station, the victim is Rebecca. Dad's face was full of pain, and his mouth was trembling so hard that he couldn't utter a complete sentence. You mean the victim was Rebecca? Mom hummed softly and calmly went to the dining table to eat. Her usual indifference hurt me again. Dad stepped forward and grabbed her chopsticks. Nancy, you can still eat? The person who died was our daughter. Mom glanced at him indifferently and stood up from the table. Dad grabbed her arm and growled. How can you be so cold-blooded? The mother turned to look at him and said, What qualifications do you have to blame me? He seemed to have his throat strangled. He opened his mouth but couldn't utter a word. 15. Long time no see, Nancy. Now do you remember who I am? The man in the interrogation room stared at my mother and smiled. How does it feel to know that the victim is your daughter? Only now do I understand why men hate their mothers so much. It turned out that 10 years ago, the mother helped a man who roped her daughter win a lawsuit. His daughter couldn't accept this result and finally end her life. So he hated my mother, and he wanted to take revenge on me for all the pain he had suffered. He wanted my mother to experience the pain of losing her own daughter. I covered my chest and took a few steps back. But that's okay. It can be considered that neither of us owes anyone anything. Do you know how stubborn your daughter is? She would never admit that you're not a good lawyer until her death. It's such a pity that at such a young age, she have to bear the guilt for her mother. The man thought these words would stimulate my mother, but he miscalculated. My mother's face remained calm from beginning to end. I just listened quietly as the man described the whole process of killing me. This almost broke the man's defense, and he pounded the table frantically with his handcuffed hands. Aren't you sad? Why aren't you sad? Are you a mother? I don't know why, but at this moment I felt a little sorry for this murderer. He may not know that not everyone is like him. Love your children so much. 16. The entrance of the police station was surrounded by a crowd of media. Nancy, did you know that the victim was your daughter? Nancy, I heard that you previously provided the police with proof that the murderer was mentally ill. Can you tell me how you feel now? According to insiders, you and your wife have always resented Rebecca. Is this true? Do you think you're a good father? Dad's face turned blue and then purple. He opened his mouth but didn't know where to start. I stood by and smiled bitterly. How could he be a competent father? I have asked him for help before. Dad, I seem to be sick. Whenever I close my eyes, I will think of that night. I'm scared and I want to move back home. But he said, don't come back. If you weren't so willful and insisted on moving out, your brother wouldn't have done that. If you like living outside, then die outside. The father revealed to the media that my brother became a vegetable because he tried to save a strange girl. The younger brother was given the title of a brave man and was said to be worthy of being Nancy's son. My parents are taking advantage of my younger brother's achievements, and their careers are flourishing. But I didn't know that I was living in a rental house of less than 20 square meters, just barely surviving day by day. When I had a mental breakdown, I cut off my long hair and shaved my head like a madman. Plus overeating. I reached 150 kilograms. Looking at the girl with a buzz cut and a muscular build in the mirror, I actually thought this was a good thing because it prevented me from being targeted by bad guys. Even though I was in such a shabby state, I once thought about living a good life. I longed to stand in the sun like a normal girl. I have my own friends and someone to talk to. Tell me it's not my fault, but no one was ever willing to lend me a hand. What I got more of was the cold stares from passersby and the ridicule from colleagues. And speak badly to parents. 17. My parents returned home and thought they were free from the media. But I don't know which reporter uploaded the video to the internet. This has aroused condemnation from a large number of netizens who are filled with a strong sense of justice. Netizens dug out the family's address, and some even sent wreaths to the parents. My father's school was also greatly affected by this incident. Netizens asked the school to give an explanation, believing that someone like the father is not worthy of being a teacher. My mother's law firm is crowded with people every day. The reputation she had worked so hard for was ruined in an instant. The sun was shining brightly on the day of the funeral. Apart from my younger brother, who couldn't accept the fact, all the relatives who usually disliked me came, as well as some strangers. At this moment, they all had sad expressions on their faces. I watched myself being put into the small jar. My father, who has always been gentle and polite, couldn't help but burst into tears. He said he regretted not fulfilling his responsibilities as a father. If he could, he would die in my place. Mom finally shed tears. Her lips trembled. I'm sorry, Rebecca. Rebecca. How can Mom not love you? Rebecca. It turns out she still remembers my name, but I haven't heard it for a long time. Since when did she stop calling me that? Maybe it started because I took the test paper no less than 3 times and still made so many mistakes. Or maybe it was because I won 3rd place in the city's essay writing competition and couldn't wait to share it with her. She said, your brother won 1st place in the national math competition, but he didn't even show off. Why are you showing off? My mother knelt down in front of the tombstone, crying and beating her chest. Seeing this, Dad also knelt down beside her. Kowtow hard in front of my tombstone. It's your parents who have let you down. Mom and Dad are too busy. They only think about giving you and your brother a better life, but they neglect to care about you. Bang, bang. Every time he kowtowed hard, a layer of skin would be broken on his forehead, until bloodstains appeared on his forehead. Look how hypocritical it is. I stood in front of the tombstone and looked at them coldly as they acted hypocritically. I don't believe they really regret it. At best, they are trying to assuage their guilt. Unfortunately, I'm just a soul. They can't hear me. They can't see me. Sure enough, Dad suddenly raised his head. The sadness in his eyes has been replaced by indifference. He said to the group of strangers, "Did you record it?" The stranger waved his phone and nodded. "I recorded it, don't worry." The wind in the cemetery was so strong that it made my light body tremble. I curled up and smiled indifferently. That's right. If you don't cherish your life, you will suddenly regret it when you die. The connections my parents had accumulated over the years came in handy at this time. Plus the video taken at the cemetery. Soon the online criticism turned into sympathy. Rebecca's parents are also first-time parents. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. I heard Rebecca is introverted and probably didn't communicate with her parents. Anyway, I don't believe there are parents who don't love their children. Dad sat in the study, looking at the comments on his phone. He showed a satisfied smile. For the first time, I realized that becoming a soul was such a cruel thing. I want to push over the lamp. I want to knock over the glass. I wanted to scare him. I want to tell him that I am always by his side. I know everything he does. Unfortunately, I can't do it. Fortunately, my soul is getting weaker day by day. I think I'm about to disappear. Finally, I don't have to be trapped in this home that doesn't belong to me. 18. Time passes quickly, and those who are alive must keep living. My death did not have much impact on my parents. They still go to work and go home as usual. My mother went to work as usual that day. Not long after she arrived at the law firm, she received a call from the school leader. It was said that my father was blocked by a group of people at the school gate. During the struggle, my father was hit on the head by someone and fainted on the spot. The mother was incredulous. Do you know who they are? He has always been kind to everyone and doesn't have any enemies. Yes, my father is kind to others and has always had a good reputation in the industry. But he only treated his own daughter harshly. The school leader paused and said, I heard that it was a group of netizens who saw some videos online. For the first time, a look of panic appeared on my mother's calm face. After she hung up the phone, she immediately searched the internet. The video of the younger brother's real name report became a hot topic. In the video, he sent out my bottle of antidepressant pills, the last certificate of severance of relationship I left behind, and a passbook. He confessed that I was sexually assaulted and that my parents concealed the truth and tortured me mentally for 5 years. Mom rushed to the hospital. My younger brother sat in front of my father's bed. His eyes were empty, and there was no expression on his face. Maybe my mother was too angry, and she slapped my brother hard. His handsome face immediately turned red. You actually went to Rebecca's rental house that day, right? You only know that she is your sister. We are your parents who gave birth to you and raised you, you ungrateful bastard. As she said this, the mother started crying and beat her brother's chest. I raised you in vain. What your father and I did was to defend you, wasn't it? You didn't even graduate from college because of her. You were so smart, but she ruined you. The younger brother grinned. Didn't you and Dad teach me that? How can we feel at ease when our sister died so tragically? My brother wanted to say something, but was interrupted by the doctor, who came into the ward. The doctor looked regretful and said that Dad was diagnosed with brain cancer. When my mother heard the news, her face turned pale instantly. She looked at my brother. Are you satisfied now? My brother sniffed, and his voice became a little hoarse. Haven't you ever thought that this is retribution? My brother took out my red diary from his backpack and threw it to my mother. She wanted to live countless times and begged you to help her, but you and Dad ignored her. Do you really think that beast killed my sister? My brother choked for a moment. Then he raised his head, stubbornly trying not to let the tears fall. You are so terrible. You have no guilt at all. Instead, he said that everything he did was for me. But don't worry, with my sister's experience as a lesson, I won't blame myself, and I won't be PUA by you. I will live well with my sister's share. After saying that, he turned and walked out of the ward. Mom broke down, and she screamed, Alex, where are you going? Come back. She stumbled out and chased after him. "Mommy needs you, Alex." Tears covered her cheeks, the usually capable and decent Nancy. She prayed that my brother would look back. She seemed to feel that her brother would never come back once he left. "Alex, Mommy, please." She fell heavily to the ground, murmuring, "But, your father, and I really love you." My brother's figure slowly disappeared at the end of the corridor. 19. My mother stumbled out of the ward and chased after him to the hospital entrance. She watched her brother get into a taxi, and she was terrified. She took out her cell phone, called my brother, and drove after him. The phone was hung up again and again, and she called again and again. "Please answer the phone, Alex." "Mom is wrong, Alex. Answer the phone." As he spoke, tears dripped onto the phone. I was sitting in the passenger seat, and all I could do was feel sorry for her. There wasn't much fluctuation in my heart. I looked at her gradually transparent body and reached out to cover her eyes. He leaned close to her ear and said, "I will never forgive you and Dad." Mom's body trembled violently. She heard it. It's great that I finally told her quietly. There was a surge of cars on the street, and all I heard was a bang. At the bend, her car collided with an oncoming truck. The surroundings fell into chaos. Cries and screams echoed in my ears. Some people said to call the police, while others said to call an ambulance. Mom was leaning against the seat, covered in blood. Scarlet blood flowed down her forehead to her cheeks. I stood beside her calmly, watching her life slip away bit by bit. It is said that when a person is on the verge of death, he can see things that he cannot see at other times. My mother opened her eyes with difficulty, and her expression changed from shock to resentment. "There are other emotions that I don't understand." She spoke with difficulty. "Rebecca, Rebecca." I floated in front of her and came face to face with her. "Don't call me. I'm not your child anymore. That night, I gave it all back to you. And the name as well. I'll give it back to you too." After using up the last of my strength, I turned and stepped into the chaos. I heard my mother's voice. She almost begged, "My child, forgive your mother." "I'm sorry. It's your parents who are sorry for you." I didn't respond to her, nor did he accept her apology. The priest asked me, "You would rather disappear between heaven and earth than tell her. Is it worth it?" I smiled, not caring whether it was worth it or not. I was born in chaos and will return to chaos when I die. At least for me now. No longer anyone's child. She was no longer anyone's daughter. I belong only to me. 20. Extra. The child who shouldn't have come. Nancy lay haggard on the hospital bed. Dan put the peeled grapefruit on the bedside table. "The doctor said you need to breastfeed for 3 months. Nancy didn't respond, but turned her face away indifferently. Dan sighed helplessly. "I know it's unfair for you to get pregnant and have a child when your career is on the rise." He pursed his lips. "You heard what the doctor said. If you give up this baby, you will never be able to get pregnant again." Dan wants to say something else. The nurse came in with the baby in her arms and interrupted what he was going to say. "Look how cute the baby is with those little eyes and little nose. It's just like you. She's going to be a little beauty when she grows up." Under the persuasion of Dan and the nurse, Nancy finally agreed and breastfed her daughter for 3 months. She looked at the wrinkled little person in her arms and whispered to Dan, "I don't know whether she will be like you or me when she grow up." Dan curled his lips and smiled. "Our genes are so strong. We will only be better than our parents, don't worry." "I hope so. By the way, let's give our daughter a name." Nancy glanced at a magazine next to her and said, "Let's call her Rebecca." Dan wanted to ask if it was too hasty, but saw that Nancy looked impatient. He finally held it back. "Okay, let's call you Rebecca. Extra too. Rebecca." I asked God for help before my soul completely dissipated. I entered my brother's dream and saw him. His eyes were red. "Sister, you finally came to see me." I want to reach out and touch his head like I did when I was a child, but I found that my younger brother was already a head taller than me. "Alex, you are an adult now." The younger brother wiped away his tears and said, "Sister, will you blame me? Otherwise, why haven't you come to my dream for so long?" I shook my head. "I'm just trying to smooth things over. Don't you want to be my brother anymore?" The younger brother showed surprise in his eyes. "Can you let me be your older brother?" I smiled and said, "Of course, provided you live your life well." My brother nodded firmly. He believed what I said and cheered up. The priest said that I had violated a taboo, and it might be difficult for me to start a new life. But considering my tragic death in my previous life, it will allow me to be with my brother in a different way. This way it wouldn't count as breaking one's promise. Time flies, and 3 years have passed in the blink of an eye. The pre-grant woman touched my head and said, "My cute cat, will you love me as much as you love your master?" I nudged the woman. Meow meow. Of course, this way my brother won't be lonely. End of story.